2017中华民国儿童权利公约首次国家报告国际审查会议，会议开始。We'll now start the review meeting. Mr. Doig, the floor is yours.
Good morning,
大家早，
everybody. Welcome back
各位早安，
to our dialogue.
欢迎各位再次回到我们进行
And I hope
对话的现场。
We can complete our dialogue today
我相信
at
今
around
天
noon or a little bit
可
later,
以在中午
but
左
I
右
don't expect to
或稍微晚一
move
点点
into
的
the
时间呢，
afternoon as
将我
well.
们之间的
So,
讨论完成。我想应该不会讨
We
论
will
到下
start
午。
this morning with some leftover of
今天早
yesterday.
上呢，会先从昨
And that is
天
the issue
剩下的一些问题
of mental
开始，就是我们想问
The issue
心
was
理
raised
健
by
康
Mr.
相关的
Tobin
问题。
yesterday afternoon.
昨天下午，托本教
And
授
due to lack of time,
提
the
到了这样子的
answer
问
was
题，
very short.
好像当时听到的
And
回复蛮简
the
短。
delegation likes to have an opportunity to provide some more information
如果
about
政
mental
府
health,
代表团可以
the
针对
problems, the
心理
programs,
健康
and what
这一
else.
块再多讲一下
So you
方
have the
案
floor.
等等这之类的，就是就昨天的这个问题进行一些补充回答。以下时间交给政府代表。
从少年的心理健康方面
Of oral and mental hygiene, please respond to this question, and then MOE, please supplement by talking about the programs that are implemented in schools. Thank you for the question on mental health. In Taiwan, at the very beginning, we consider mental health to be a disease issue, but in recent years, we think this is a mental health issue instead of disease. We hope that child can have a healthy life since the time as an infant. So we want to start it with the mental health of women, of pregnant women or mothers. We want to begin with the mental health of the pregnant women. Only with a mentally healthy mother will the child to have good mental health as well. So we invite many experts to shoot videos for training for doctors and nurses. After these videos were produced, in the second year, we started to ask medical facilities to play these videos on premise, and they work with after delivery care centers to also play such educational videos to the mothers. And then we work with Society of Psychiatry or Society of OB/GYN to discuss possible problems or issues that may haunt pregnant women or new mothers so that we can produce some preventive measures. So that's the first part that we do. And the second part is that we think it is important that parents educate their children in a proper way instead of using corporal punishments or beating or scolding. So we draft a positive parental education pamphlet and provide such a pamphlet or brochure to parents so that they know what they can do when they educate their children. As for children with ADHD or children with autism with special needs, sometimes parents in these families are confused. They do not know how to deal with the situation. So, and northern, middle, and southern Taiwan, we organize special training workshop for parents from such families in order to help family members to know how to take care of children with special needs, because these children have special needs emotionally or physically. This is our brief response. Well, by the time these children are teenagers, we have a hotline which is supported by our Department of Mental and Oral Health. If people have questions about mental health, they can call this hotline. We receive around 67,000 calls every year with this hotline. And there's also a civil organization that is called Lifeline. If people are troubled deeply emotionally, they can call these hotlines, and every year they receive around 170,000 calls. We also establish a follow-up system to follow up with people who have attempted suicide. And at the Health Bureau, there are case managers to follow up such people who had attempted suicide to prevent them from hurting themselves again. Thank you. Any extra information? When it comes to mental health, MOE passed a student's guidance program in 2014. And under these guidelines, in every school, there should be professionals who take care of children's mental health. And under this act, it is stipulated that schools have to create a 3-tier mechanism. The first tier is promotion of health of the students on campus. The second tier is intervention. Schools will focus on children who are on the verge of problematic trouble, or problematic behavior, or children who have suffered grave trauma. And at this second tier, we generate case-by-case plan and provide counseling or small group discussions with these students. The third tier is placement. When children already exhibit biased behaviors, then there will be intervention with social workers, with family counseling, and occupational therapy. And all of these professional services will be provided at the third tier. We hope through this 3-tier mechanism, schools can do better in providing counseling services for students. I'm from MOE. Well, my colleague already mentioned the 3-tier mechanism. Well, MOE asks local government to ask schools to establish counseling rooms. There should be psychologists and social workers at such counseling rooms or counseling centers. Well, in New Taipei City, there are 4 regions, and in each region there is such a counseling office. So if in that region schools have found students with mental health issues, then students will work with this local government's mental health office to provide help to the student. And the local government and Bureau of Education will work with Department of Health to together provide supports. If the issue has a medical element, then such a case will also be transferred to such medical facilities for further treatment. So is there any follow-up from the committee member on this topic?
Thank you for those.
谢谢各位详细的答复。我很快的问一个问题。那有没有针对年轻人的心理健康问题呢，有特别收集数据呢？
心理健康方面。
About mental health of students. Anyone? Department of Mental and Oral Health. Do you have any statistical data that you can share with the committee members? Well, let me add some more information first. Department of Mental and Oral Health in the past 3 years has completed a health survey for students who are between 4th grade to 7th grade. And this year, we're seeing some results from that survey. From that survey, we can see that, well, the students in our cohort from 4th grade to 7th grade, the prevalence of mental health issues, in fact, is quite high. According to that study, around 30% of students from that cohort are emotionally troubled, including autism, ADHD, and all other mental health issues. So that's a general percentage. And 10% of them are students with ADHD. I'm from MOE. I want to supplement by saying that as for data or numbers of students who have mental health problems, I think local governments mainly have the responsibilities. Well, the counseling officers I mentioned earlier are in charge of helping with schools and supporting such students. And such counseling officers will help students from elementary schools to high schools, and the data is kept by this counseling office in the local government. Sometimes this data has something to do with privacy, and it is confidential, and therefore MOE does not have such data. But if you need such data, we can request the local government to provide and probably submit to the committee members for your further reference. Okay, I talk about the survey, the epidemic survey. If we look at the cross-sectional prevalence, there are around 10.5% ADHD and phobia 8.7%, separation anxiety 4.2%, social anxiety 3.6%. Autism 1%. People who have suicidal intentions, well, about 3%, and students who actually commit suicide account for 0.7%. So MOE, maybe you can review the campus reports and later on let us know how many of those reports are suicide cases or other mental health issue cases.
Okay. Thank you very much for all this additional information with details, thanks to a recent survey, so we have a rather clear picture of the mental health issues. Are you on that? Okay, sorry. Go ahead. Yes, thanks very much for this additional information. I'd like one more piece of additional information, of course, and that is in terms of the effectiveness of the of the follow-up and the treatment. Have you carried out evaluations of, in particular, I would say, responses to the hotline? Because if the hotlines are getting 170,000 calls a year, and these are being, I presume, mostly channeled to specialist services according to the situation of the child concerned, it would be extremely useful to know if the services are effectively able to respond in an appropriate manner to each of those specific situations of the children. And a subsidiary question, but we shouldn't probably deal with it now, but possibly we can do it within the discussion on education, would be the potential link between stress in the educational system, or the feeling of the perception of stress of children in the education system, and any possible mental health issues. But I'm sure we'll deal with that in the forthcoming discussion. But for the moment, it would be good to know if you've evaluated the responses to the hotline and possibly other interventions.
谢谢委员的提问啊。
The questions. Speaking of the hotline, there are two types of hotlines. One type is sponsored and subsidized by the central government, providing advice on issues related to mental health. So that hotline is called reassuring hotline. And the other type, hotline, is actually run by the volunteers from the private sector. It's called Lifeline. 170,000 calls are made to the hotline, and the reassuring hotline received 67,000 calls. And in fact, the caller asked a wide range of issues when they called. And there is a separate hotline specifically serving men. Usually that serves adult males suffering from, say, domestic violence. Now, back to the two hotlines. In addition to providing counseling services and listening, it's important that these two hotlines indeed transfer these callers to access resources at different institutions. And if it's an emergency situation, we will locate the caller right away. Every year, we actually saved 400 lives through these two hotlines. As for the effectiveness of the services of the hotlines, right now we don't have detailed information on the referral rate. But during the past 2 decades, we have been making a lot of progress in promoting mental health. Throughout Taiwan, we have over 200 hospitals offering mental health clinics, and we have 284 mental health clinics working at the community level. So wherever you go in Taiwan, you can see a mental health clinic. So you can walk in the clinic anytime. It's very convenient. In Taiwan, we have 1,600 psychiatrists. As for pediatric psychiatrists, there are 200, more than 200 of them. So I think we do have sufficient manpower to provide such services, and they are also widely available. Well, the offshore islands and the remote areas may not be that convenient for people with mental health to seek help, but we do have a lot of psychiatrists as well as psychotherapists offering services in different corners of our society. So at the ministry, we actually have set up many health stations throughout Taiwan. In Taiwan, we have 360 health stations in each and every local community. And at each health station, we require it to provide free counseling services. So if you have any mental issues you would like to seek counseling, you can go to a local health station to seek help. Thank you. If the MOE can offer some comments on the stress at schools and its relations with mental health, please go ahead. Yes. Between 2005 and 2016, during those 12 years, the number of students engaging in self-injury or suicide every year, there were 56 to 83 students. In 2015, 67 students. 2016, 60 students engaged in self-harm or suicide. Based on our understanding, the reason why students engaged in self-injury, there are several reasons. One has to do with the stress at school. Also, failed love relationships or conflicts with parents at home. There are also cases involving emotional stress or addiction to the internet and other mental disorders. We don't have data yet on the number of students who actually have engaged in specific self-injury, suicide. So.
Thank you very much for all the additional information. We move to Cluster 7 on education, and I'll give the floor to Mrs. Karp to present the questions on this cluster.
Good morning. Of course, the crux of the matter in raising new generations that are aware of the rights according to the CRC or as human beings lies in education. So I request your forgiveness if I ask many questions about education, because I want to make the plan clear to me how your system works. And I'll start. We have discussed yesterday the problem for education in remote and rural areas, and the priority regional education promote plans that is in action now. I would like to know what is the scope of time until this plan will be finalized, and do you have a constant evaluation of how it works? Now I come to the second question, is about the shortage of preschools. And I understand that here again you have a project 2017-2020 to maximize the public education and care service project. Now, I would like to know if you have information how many children do not go to preschool because of this shortage, and what is being done with them until the project is finished. I would like also to know why preschools are not free tuition, because this is the basic of development, and children who go to preschools are much stronger in the beginning of their studies at primary school than those children who do not go to preschools. So do you have an intention to make preschools free of tuition? Now, as to private and public schools, here I would like to understand, because according to your replies to the list of issues, I understand that senior high schools can enjoy, students of senior high schools can enjoy subsidies. So what is the meaning of subsidies? I understand that it's not free tuition, because only skill-based senior high school is free tuition, and senior high schools for low-income families. So the understanding is that there are still children who have to work or maybe have loans to complete their studies all along. And I would like to understand if the table 28, which speaks about subsidies but is not disaggregated, and I still don't understand the meaning of subsidies. Does it cover all tuition or not? At the end of the replies, it is said that the goals of 12 years basic education will be achieved subsidies for all. So what does it mean? Is it free tuition? And when will this goal be achieved? Did you make any poll or evaluation about children who, because tuition is not free, do not complete the studies? How many children are there who go to work without completing their studies? And connected to this is the question of services to dropouts. I understand that there is a problem of children who cannot go through the tension of the high school, and there is lack of minimum services to deal with them, to give them alternative schools or finding work for them. Some of the NGOs work with these children, and I wonder what are the plans to widen the services for dropout children. I would like to know the differences between the terminology of several schools that you have. What is the difference between reform school, correctional school, cooperative education, transition school, self-industry cooperation, vocational school? What are the differences? And I understand that some of the schools have very limited education, not the usual curriculum. And in some of these schools, human rights, civil education is not given to the children. So I would like to know more about these schools. Now I would like to speak about what we heard from children about their stress in school. And it was mentioned before as a cause, maybe one of the causes of committing suicide. But first of all, children complain that the rights of rest and leisure is infringed upon because they have long hours of studying, even in holidays and in and all over the day, that they are evaluated only according to academic achievement, and they have to follow examination and tests all the time. So education is aimed at bringing them, enabling them to go to senior high school. They complain about the method of education, which is not a universal curriculum. They have no option, not wide option to choose, like music, art, sport is very limited. And some children complain that they may be punished for lack of success in tests. I think that I'm telling you about the complaints because I think there is a need to rethink the method of education, bringing children to critical thinking and to innovative thinking. To say the least, many children are not happy in schools. They look at schools like prisons or factories of education. And I think that it's pity to raise children who are not happy at school. I think that school time should be pleasure for children and should widen their interests and energy. We have been talking about infringement of the civil rights, and I won't ask again, but my only question with regard to the curriculum now is, do you plan to make CRC education obligatory in schools? Of course, obligatory in training of teachers and now another question that we started to discuss is the participation of children in school life. And it was mentioned yesterday that you have a project of the school guidelines of 2018 and curriculum guideline for 2019. My question is whether these guidelines tend to give children a larger participation in all the committees that are involved in school, including the Equal Gender Education Committee and the committees of discipline and other committees of school. What are the details of these projects? I would also like to ask whether schools have professional counselors, which every school has, to deal with problem of children, to enable children to complain, to deal with bullying. I'm not aware, and I didn't find answers in your, we didn't ask, of course. Now, regarding disciplinary measures, it's said that the Ministry of Education issued a notice for school rules of students, guidelines, and discipline. My question is whether it's not better to legislate the optional disciplinary measures that will be unified in all schools and for all teachers, and children may know what are the permitted disciplinary measures that teachers can use. Speaking about corporal punishment, of course, we have discussed it, and the question is, what reviews are made to ensure that the legislation that forbids criminal corporal punishment is really implemented? The question, how many teachers were punished for using corporal punishment? The answer shows that a very limited number of teachers. And I don't speak about criminal proceedings against teachers who use serious corporal punishment. In the written answers, I understood that only teachers who teach in correctional schools are brought to criminal justice. And in other schools, it's only disciplinary administrative measures. I would like to know better if there is a follow-up about complaints in this regard. Against for bullying, the number of children who use the hotlines is very small compared to what is suspected to be a phenomenon that harm children. And in the tables shows that the number of the children using hotlines is decreasing. So I would like to know what is the cause and what is being done with complaints. I understand that the perpetrators are being dealt with. The question is there counseling and help for the victims of bullying? I'll stop with this to now.
Other members of the committee? Yes, Ms. Landi.
I'd like to ask some further questions, not on education, but on leisure, culture and play. So what's happening outside school? Already Mrs. Karp raised the issue of long school days. And I know there are guidance that are saying that schools should close at 5:30. And that seems to me still to be a very long day. And I wondered, is that enforced in any way, or has any thought been given to having that as a much shorter day, that schools should close earlier? But my main questions are relating to what happens after school. And children were telling us that they often then go to cram schools, and these cram schools can last to 9:30 in the evening, which seems ridiculously late in terms of children getting rest and getting to bed and getting some sleep. So is there any guidance on cram schools and their opening hours, or any plans to have any restrictions on the length of time that children can be out doing those external educational activities? That's one set of questions. Then more generally on play, my question is there any national policy statement on play, any strategy on play? Many countries have a play strategy. We know that play is incredibly important for mental health, for obesity, for learning, and I haven't seen anything in the documents that really looks at the idea of play as an important dimension in the children's strategy. One of the issues raised with us is play space, and the fact that there's so much artificial play space. It's incredibly important as well that children get to play in the natural environment. So again, what are the opportunities for children, particularly children in the cities, to get out into outdoor green safe space where they can run as opposed to play on very restricted play equipment? And then finally, this cluster also covers culture. And we've seen very little about that idea of children being able to be involved in the cultural life of their country. It mentions that there are some grants for some schools that they can apply for. I think they can apply as a discretion to host activities that celebrate indigenous cultures or Hakka culture. And my question is there anything that requires culture, indigenous community culture and other cultures in Taiwan to be part of the national curriculum? Thank you.
Thank you. Your Excellency, you have the floor for the answering of the questions.
I would like to thank the two committee members for this set of questions. I think most of the questions will be responded by MOE. But as for questions on reformatory schools or correctional schools, I think MOJ will respond to it. As for issues on indigenous cultures and peoples, maybe Council of Indigenous Peoples can provide some information. So shall we start with MOE? Ms. Karp has raised quite a few questions about education. I think I will give the time to the representatives from MOE. I would give a summary, and my colleagues may provide extra information. First of all, students and schools in remote areas. Well, how do we improve the education quality in those places? Well, there are about 3,500 elementary schools and high schools in Taiwan, and some of them are in the prioritized areas, which means that they demand more resources. There are about 1,200, that is to say 1/3 of these schools are our priorities in remote areas. For these schools, we have subsidy program for them to support local governments with staffing and with funding. This program has been ongoing for many years, and this program does help to improve the quality of teaching in remote areas. Schools in these areas are more remote, and they have fewer students. And the classes size in urban areas are larger. So it's not very it's more costly, in other words, to provide support to remote area students because there are fewer students over there. But still, with this program, we do see the need to provide more support. So in addition to the MOE program I just mentioned, MOE has other projects that may integrate digital education. And recently, the Executive Yuan and MOE have together devised a guideline for remote area education. Yesterday, our Congress passed this bill. So it will be promulgated by the presidential office shortly. This guideline decides to divide schools in remote areas into 5 categories. And schools at different levels will receive different level of support. The supports will go to stabilizing the teaching staff. So we have a solution for that. That is the hiring plan for specialized teachers in order to retain the teachers in these rural areas. And we also improve the dormitory for teachers and students in those remote areas. And we provide subsidy for teachers and schools to provide after-class education to support the children who are lag behind. And this subsidy can go as long as 12 years, so that principals or teaching staff of these schools, as long as they're willing to stay there, we have the subsidies to support the operation of that schools. So the guideline was passed by Congress yesterday, by our legislative yuan yesterday. And after it becomes promulgated, MOE will start allocate special budgeting for those programs. I believe that this new guideline, this new act, is going to help the education in rural areas. So we continuously invest resources in rural areas. So when such programs will be finalized, or be ended, be concluded, there isn't a definite time frame, because this is a continuous work. We will continue to invest more resources in rural areas. As for the insufficient number of preschools, currently, MOE has a plan to create more public preschools from 2017 to 2020. So 2 to 5 years old students are the students who go to preschools or nursing schools. And 96% of 5-year-old students in Taiwan are able to go to preschools. As for 2 to 5 year old or students who are under 5 years old, only 50% of them go to preschools. Hopefully, by 2020, at least 60% of children between 2 to 5 will be able to go to preschools. And public preschools includes public funded schools and non-profit preschools. Currently, the public-private preschools ratio is 3 to 7. We hope to raise that ratio to 4 to 6. So by 2020, we hope to create more public preschools, or even to raise the private-public preschools ratio to 1 to 1, hopefully. Next question about tuition exemption at high school. Since 2014, we have the grade 1 to 12 compulsory education program, and most of the tuitions are exempted for compulsory education. And after elementary school and junior high school education, students may go to normal high school, or they may go to vocational high schools. In vocational high schools, students learn practical skills, how to make things, how to work with things. If they go to the vocational schools starting from 2014, the tuition is exempted. Elementary school and junior high schools are compulsory, and therefore no tuition has to be paid. So students at elementary schools only need to pay 700 or 800 NT dollars every semester. At junior high school, students only have to afford 1,500 NT dollars every semester. In vocational schools, tuition is free. And if students go to normal high school, if the annual income of this family is below 1.48 million NT dollars, then the tuition is free. If the family income is above 1.48 million NT dollars, then the student has to pay for high school education. So I think currently at secondary education, only the households which make more than $1.48 million and have to pay for high school tuition, and other students do not have to pay for the tuition. But there are some administrative fees or fee for textbooks, for uniforms, or fees for lunch. And students still have to pay for these miscellaneous items unless they are from low-income families. The fourth question, again, on tuition exemption, are we going to reach an overall zero tuition goal? Well, as I said earlier, elementary school and junior high schools are compulsory. There's no tuition. And for high schools, only those whose family made more than $1.48 million have to pay for normal high school tuition. So in the future, well, currently we do not have a plan to exempt the tuition for the families whose annual income has exceeded 1.48 million NT dollars. So in the foreseeable future, these families still have to pay for normal high school. As for preschool education, for 5-year-old children to attend preschool, tuition is free, and for students who are from underprivileged families, they can receive subsidies. As for students who are ranged between 2 to 4 years old, they can also receive some subsidies for daycare. So the central government provides such subsidies, whereas the local government has extra subsidies as well for daycare. And currently, we were under the leadership of Minister without portfolio, Mr. Lin. We hope to have a new plan by the end of this year, and this plan will be directed to children between 2 to 4, maybe to exempt their tuition at preschools. But such program is still being discussed and not finalized. It may be finalized by the end of this year or the beginning of next year. And are there children who are not able to finish schools because of lack of economic resources? Currently, we have subsidies to help children from disadvantaged families. So I don't think there are any students who have to drop out due to economic issues. Most of them drop out because of family issues or because they do not want to study in schools.
As for services for dropouts, on dropouts, outside the school system, we also work with the social welfare departments, tapping into social resources provided by the Ministry of the Interior and the National Police Administration to provide services. We have 3 strategies. First, if there are dropouts, we will first of all make sure reportings are made, and we will help search the missing students from schools. So if the school finds some students fail to show up at school, they will report to the authorities, and the National Police Administration will help search for missing dropouts. In the search process, every month, we also publicize the number of dropouts at each local government, and for school districts with higher dropout rates, we will convene meetings to review the reasons. In addition to the National Police Administration, local communities, neighborhoods are also involved to search missing dropouts. After locating the missing dropout, we then talk to the student and his parents, and we will provide counseling and guidance to help him return to school. After he goes back to school, the school will arrange certain programs and courses to help the student to be more willing to stay on campus. So different schools all have programs of this kind to tailor to the needs of these students. At the same time, schools also set up a single window to handle applications from these students to return to school. As for the if we are talking about students who are dropouts, actually, we do have so-called halfway resources classes or other specially designed classes to help these students learn in their own ways. For example, some students drop out because of dysfunctional family background. In that case, we can keep the students at school from Monday to Friday, and then they go back home only on the weekend. There are also some students who have been involved in, say, sexual transactions. Then after the court ruling, social workers will stay involved. Then the students may be transferred to the transitional schools. The transition schools are usually located in remote areas so that the students can learn in a relatively safe and isolated environment. They go back home only on the Chinese New Year. In other words, transition schools aim to provide a stable, safe environment where interference from the outside is minimized. At the local government level, every quarter, a meeting will be convened to look into the services provided for these students with special needs, including dropouts and students who used to be involved in sexual transactions. Next, corporal punishment and the statistics on teachers using corporal punishment on their students. Between 2012 and 2016, based on our statistics, the number of teachers sanctioned because of using corporal punishment is about 100 every year. In 2010, it's 121, 2013, 110 teachers, 2014, 140, 2015, 157 teachers, and 2016, 99 teachers were sanctioned. Well, according to our Education Fundamental Act, students must not be subjected to corporal punishment in schools. and teachers involved in corporal punishment will be sanctioned. So in the Teachers Act, we do have specific regulations and provisions prohibiting teachers from using corporal punishment. In violation of these provisions, there will be administrative punishment from warning to severe demerit points. And in very severe cases, that means corporal punishment has caused mental and physical harm to the students, then we can impose the decision of dismissal, discontinuation of the employment to the teacher. As for the disciplinary measures taken against students, yes, the MOE has the overall guidelines in place. All schools will have to follow the guidelines in setting up their own method of disciplinary actions. There were discussions about maybe there should be a law at the central government level to define what kind of disciplinary actions is legal or illegal. But after discussion, it is decided that we should respect the autonomy of each school. Therefore, the Ministry of Education only offers a guideline about the major principles that schools must follow in determining their methods of counseling and discipline. And usually when setting up such methods, there will be committees at different schools comprising of student representatives, parents representatives, teachers representatives. Therefore, schools will follow their own methods of guidance and discipline. Moreover, the professional counselors on campus, according to the Student Guidance Act, after 2017, Article 10 of that act says that primary and secondary schools must have counseling officers. For primary schools, if there are fewer than 24 classes, there should be at least one professional counseling teacher. For those schools with more than 25 classes, there has to be one additional counselor. As for middle school classes, if there are fewer than 15 classes, at least one counselor has to be in place. For those bigger than 15 classes at school, there should be at least an additional counselor on campus. In the senior high school, for schools with fewer than 12 classes, there should be at least one counselor. So right now, counselors working at primary school, there are 770 of them. In the middle school, there are 1,324 of them. In senior high school, there are 1,517 counselors on campus. So every school has professional counselors on campus. And starting the 1st of August this year, we are going to increase the number of counselors at every school year by year. On indigenous education, educational activities in relation to indigenous peoples. If we are talking about the Indigenous Day event, if the student is a member of the indigenous people, then the student can take a day off and go back to his indigenous community to take part in the indigenous festival activities. Again, indigenous education, especially indigenous cultures, being incorporated into the curriculum. At the primary school, we do have so-called indigenous language teaching. Indigenous languages teaching is a required course for all students. Every student will have to pick an indigenous or local language to study based on their own ethnic background or based on their interest. Each student can pick either Hakka, Taiwanese, or 16 different indigenous languages in this local or indigenous language teaching class. So it's a required course. In middle schools, it's an elective course. Again, students can choose which language they would like to study based on their interest or ethnic background. The Council of Indigenous Peoples has also come up with a program to certify the indigenous language proficiency. In other words, if a student has high proficiency in the indigenous language, he may get extra credit when he applies for admission to senior high school or colleges. As for the manpower for teaching indigenous languages, students with a certificate in such indigenous language proficiency will also have the opportunity to serve as teachers in the future. As for, there's a question about children's representatives saying that there's too much pressure at school, there's not enough time for leisure and cultural activities. Their rights to leisure and cultural activities have been infringed. Well, I think this is not unique to Taiwan. Throughout Asia, traditional cultures place a lot of emphasis on academic studies. So the overall society and parents, or sometimes even students themselves, attach great importance to grades and academic performance at school. That's why a lot of time is spent on studies. Based on our data, because from grade 1 to grade 9 is compulsory education. There's no entrance examination. There's no pressure in this regard. But when you graduate from junior high school, you need to take a kind of like a joint entrance examination. But starting 2014, we have reformed that joint entrance examination. In the past, there were 5 subjects, and each subject would have 80 grade levels. But now we have shrunk that 80 to 7 grade levels. So students are evaluated and ranked into 7 levels rather than 80. So we hope that this reform will help students lessen their burden from studies. Moreover, in fact, when it comes to entry into high school, senior high schools, because Taiwan has such a low birth rate, for any 15-year-old in Taiwan, they can get 100% assurance in entry to a senior high school or senior vocational high school. The same goes for graduates from senior high schools when they want to enter universities. But still, many students prefer to go to prestigious universities. Therefore, the pressure really comes from the few slots available at prestigious universities. Of course, we do attach great importance to students and children's right to leisure. That's why for the past couple of years, our administration has been promoting educational reforms aimed at relieving students of the pressure from studies. We hope they can engage in adaptive learning. In addition to studies, students can also have the opportunity to go outside school, to have field trips. In addition to help students have less stressful studies at school, schools also organize a wide range of activities to celebrate the anniversary of the school, or there are activities like fairs. And every school year, there are planned field trips for students. And there's also, before the student graduates, they also go out for overnight trips. In fact, schools are also encouraged to include more activities outside school, tapping into resources at the community, in society. So the classroom is not limited to a place inside the school. Any outdoor places, from museums to parks, can serve as a classroom for students.
那至于呢，在其次一点的这个针对那个有关
Next, as for the curriculum guideline, in Taiwan, the purpose of the curriculum guideline is for the teachers to use to guide their teachings, and the publishers of textbooks as well as the authors of textbooks have some basis to know what to include in the textbooks. In the curriculum, there are elective or required courses. So there are subjects such as Mandarin Chinese, English, math, social studies, and science. There are also art-related classes. So all of these different kind of subjects are included in our curriculum guideline, and all schools at different levels have to comply with this curriculum guideline. If they do not follow such a curriculum guideline, then the schools violate relevant acts, and supervisors will go to these schools and to encourage the schools to follow such guidelines. For example, the schools miss music classes, then this constitutes a violation. If it is found out that the schools do that, this school will be corrected. And to help students to have more choices in their lessons. Currently, MOE is in the process of drafting the 2019 curriculum guideline. That guideline will be effective in 2019. In that guideline, there will be more flexibility for children to choose what they want to study. We'll take normal high school, for example. There are optional classes in high schools. So the credits for extra curriculum or for elective classes will be expanded 2 to 5 times. Now, as for whether CRC will become an integral part of the curriculum guideline or will CRC be taught in schools, per the current curriculum guideline or the 2019 curriculum guideline, which is still being drafted, there will be subjects such as civic and social studies. And civic studies is an official subject in the guidelines. And in that class, students learned about civic studies, human rights, law and order, and so on. So all of these will be taught in official teaching hours. In addition to those official subjects, there could be some unofficial lessons or prospective lessons for teachers to teach about human rights. In the 2019 curriculum guideline, there are about 19 topics, including human rights, law and order. These are two important elements that will be included in the 2019 guideline. Environmental education or gender education will also be included in the new guideline, and the teachers can integrate such topics into their teaching. Regarding CRC and lessons about CRC, but the initial report on the CRC was concluded only last year. So currently, there's no strict requirement that CRC has to be an official part of teachings in school. It is dependent on the teachers. Teachers may integrate human rights, law and order, gender issues into his or her own teaching. So teachers have the discretion. As for in the future, will we include CRC into the curriculum guideline and require all schools and all teachers to teach it? Or will we produce some materials for teachers to use in order to teach in CRC? I think there will be more discussions within MOE. As long as it is good for the students, we will always be willing to go the extra mile. Next, children's participation in school. In Taiwan, students who are under 15 are quite young. They're still in elementary or junior high schools. So their right to their legal or statutory representative are their parents. And the parents are in charge of protecting the right to education of their children. And therefore, children will represent the children in schools to join committees or meetings. For example, they may jointly discuss the hiring of teachers, the design of the classes in schools. The parents may also participate in deciding what disciplinary actions shall be taken against certain students. As for students who are above 15 years old, students who are already in high school, in fact, in June 2016, in the Education Act for high school students, stipulate that students can form student associations in schools, and such associations are self-governing bodies. And representatives from such associations will need to take part in discussions that are related to students' affairs. As I mentioned earlier, we will have a 2019 curriculum guideline. The draft has been completed. It is being discussed right now. And there are several children participants in the meetings to review the 2019 guideline. So there are students' representatives that join the review meetings for the curriculum guidelines. Students can express their opinions as to what they want to teach, because children and students are the subject of education. Of course, they are entitled to expressing their opinions. So I think their opinions will be reflected in the curriculum guideline. Take the curriculum guideline meetings I have joined. For example, I've seen that these meetings respect the opinions of students and respect their right to express their opinions. At high school levels, as long as one fair is related to students' rights, there has to be students' participation. And the National Education Administration requires schools to change their rules if their previous rules did not allow children participation. Next point about students' complaints and discipline. Oh, I think I already touched upon this question. Let me move on to bullying and how bullying is addressed. And well, the number of the callers decreased instead of an increase. I think my colleagues will respond to that issue. Well, there are usually 7 sessions throughout one day for students. So students are in school from 8 p.m. to 12. There will be a 1 hour or so lunch break. Then sessions will be resumed from 1:30 p.m. to 4 p.m. So usually there are 7 official sessions. Well, due to low birth rates and due to the change of family structure, some parents, in fact, request the schools to delay class hours because parents are usually still at work by 4:30, and therefore some parents ask the schools to add an extra session, the 8th session. So some schools will arrange this, the 8th session. But there are 2 principles that this session has to follow. First of all, students have to be voluntary to join the 8th session. That is to say, if students are willing to stay in school for this extra hour, they can stay. The second principle, in the 8th session, students can choose what they want to study. Teachers must not teach new materials in the 8th session. So during the 8th session, schools may arrange teachers to be there to provide oversight, because if students have questions they want to ask, they have someone to go to. As for after-school hours, well, especially in cities, many students go to cram schools after regular school hours. I think it is common and also unique in Taiwan or Asia. But it's but parents or students make that decision based on their needs. In principle, we do not encourage students to go to cram schools, but if students and parents themselves think that it is necessary, then we respect their choice. And cram schools is open until 9 p.m. But usually they finish all the classes by 10 p.m. So students study during the day and during the night. indeed, the studying hours are too long. And that's why, starting from 2014, we try to reform the education system in Taiwan so that the examinations will not be too much pressure for students. We reform the examinations because we want to relieve the stress on the students, so that they may feel that there is less need to go to cram schools after official school hours. But we're still monitoring the effectiveness of the new reform, and we'll continue to reform for a better education system. Now, about campus reports. Take 2015, for example. There were about 55 suicide cases reported. And around 7 and 13 cases where students try to inflict harm to themselves in middle school and elementary school. I would pause here. Thank you very much. Okay, maybe the PE Education Administration, would you like to talk about some leisure activity program? And I think Ms. Cobb asked about the definition of different schools, because there are correctional schools, reformatory schools, transition schools, and cooperative programs. Okay, I want to talk about the declining number of callers of the bullying hotline. Well, MOE has continued to ask the school to encourage their students to use these hotlines if they are bullied. So MOE encourage students to talk to the parents or teachers if they feel they are bullied, or they can submit complaint to suggestion box in school. They can also call the local government hotline or the MOE bullying hotline. This is the hotline we have been talking about. And at each school, schools will hand out questionnaires to understand the life of the students on campus. Now, since this is in an age of internet, so we do have a website to allow students to give us their thoughts. If they're bullied, they can submit their cases to the website. So I think, and the number we talk about was only the number of caller of the hotline, but now there is a whole range of diversified channels where they can report such cases, and that's probably why the number of callers to the hotline has been decreasing. Okay, so what's the definition of correctional school, transition school, and reformatory schools and cooperative programs? Okay, I think I have to elaborate on the education system in Taiwan. In Taiwan, 6-year-old students will enter elementary school. They spend 6 years there. After they graduate, they spend another 3 years in junior high school. So this is our 9-year compulsory education program. After the compulsory program, students may go to normal high school and study several subjects. And part of them may go to vocational high schools. So after 15 years old, there is a diversion of students. Some of them go to normal high schools, some go to vocational high schools. So this is some of the differences in our middle school education. And at vocational schools, they think it's very important to keep abreast with the development of the industry. So it's important for the student to learn practical skills so that after they graduate, they can easily find jobs, or they can go to vocational colleges. So at vocational high schools, there are many different programs. So in addition to the official hours, well, when I say official hours, it means that students spend time studying in schools. There may be some on-campus internship or out-of-campus internship. These are the most common programs in vocational schools. But there is a special program that allows for students to go outside the campus to intern. But that's what we call the cooperative program or the cooperative class. But the number of students in this class is not that many. So for this kind of students, they spend some time in school, and in the rest of the time, schools make arrangements to help them to work in some companies as interns. And there are different systems here. One system is called rotation. So, which means that in this quarter, in this 3 months, students spend time in school. In the next quarter, students spend time in companies. And then in the next 3 months, students come back to school. So usually there are 2 classes that rotate. So one class in school and the other class in the companies to intern. So this is the rotation type of cooperative program. And if students are in this cooperative program, MOE has established guidelines for such cooperative programs in order to protect these students' rights. For example, if they work in the companies as interns, they have to be protected by the Labor Standards Act. They have to receive minimum wages or above. So while they learn practical skills, in these internship programs, they are able to receive the minimum wages. And most of the students in the cooperative programs come from economically disadvantaged families, meaning that they have to spend time studying and also spending time working to make extra income for the family. So every year there are about 14,000 students in such cooperative programs.
Moreover, transition schools. Right now in Taiwan, we have 3 transition schools. Transition schools are set up in accordance with the Child and Youth Sexual Exploitation Prevention Act. According to Article 22 of that Act, the central government, including the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Justice, will work jointly with local governments to set up a transition school or transition schools for victims of sexual exploitation. So the students at the schools are children and minors who have been involved in sexual transaction, thus violating relevant laws. So the students usually come from dysfunctional family background. After the court ruling and the evaluation or the assessment of social workers, the children will be placed at transition schools. So that's the background of transition schools. I speak on behalf of the Sports Administration on leisure activities. We actually have an activity named SH150 that means Sports, Health, 150 minutes. So in addition to official sessions at school, every week students must spend at least 150 minutes in sports and health-related activities. This can take place during session, after session. According to our data, About 84.25% of schools have implemented the SH-150 program. We also offer a number of different modules for schools' reference when they design SH-150. For example, they can have students engage in very popular sports activities, maybe jogging, maybe some soft baseball, or relay race. So class competition can also be involved in promoting such sports and health-related activities. And we also have the so-called the big jogging activity, and students can design interesting activities when they engage in this big jogging event. Students are encouraged to accumulate the mileage they have been jogging and running, so the students can upload how many miles they have run over the past week or month. In addition, at local governments, they can also focus on specific sports. For example, this city may want to promote martial arts. That city may want to promote jumping ropes. And in designing this SH-150 programs and other leisure activities, they can take that into account. Moreover, we also organize a lot of sports games involving different schools. Every year, 50,000 students take part in these games, sports games. And there are also like dancing activities and other leisure activities organized by the MOE. More than 10,000 students take part in this activity every year. Also, we do have a lot of outdoor sports activities. More than 1,000 students usually take part in these outdoor sports activities. And mountain climbing, rock climbing are other examples of such leisure activities. We do encourage schools to provide more outdoor activities. For example, students are also encouraged to go mountain climbing, rock climbing, etc. Well, correctional schools, reformatory schools, could you please give us their definitions? For juvenile correctional institutions, there are correctional schools and reformatory schools, as well as detention centers. Correction schools basically receive juveniles that have been judged by the court that have to be placed at such correctional schools. There are also students who go there because of the protective orders. So if there are any misconducts by the staffing members of this correctional schools or reformatory schools, punishment will be imposed upon them. As for administrative punishment, in 2013 and 2014, there were 2 incidents involving corporal punishment at such schools. The Control Yuan did an investigation and punished those responsible for the incidents. So now we have reinforced training of staff members of these institutions to make sure similar incidents will not take place again. How about activities in relation to indigenous students? Indigenous students learning about their own cultures In addition to the formal schooling system, our council helps indigenous students to explore their interests, and they are also encouraged to engage in studies of indigenous cultures, history, and music learning, etc. Basically, we use the multiple intelligence model in educating our children. And we also have the cooperative programs at the indigenous communities to help the indigenous students if they need any help. And of course, efforts are also made to help them be familiar with their own cultures, languages. In 2017, we offered 62 classes involving 1,200 students. For different indigenous nations, if they have their own festival activities or celebrations on a particular day, indigenous students enrolled in other schools can also take the day off to take part in that activity. Well, I think that's all for now. Thank you for your patience, committee members. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. This is even more than all there is. So it's a very detailed and very specific information about all kinds of aspects of education in Taiwan. But there may be some follow-up question. Very, very, very brief.
Thank you for the very clear information. I still would like to know, as there is the CRC is a new idea, implementing it is a new idea, and I would like to understand the pros and cons of making the CRC studies obligatory. I think as teachers, it's a new idea for teachers. Children claim by now that they don't know much about the CRC. And as we were discussing yesterday, there is a difference between human rights education and the more specific children's rights education. So I think that it could be easier for teachers to choose subjects they know better, human rights education, than the new subject of the CRC. So I would like to know what are the reasons of not making the CRC education obligatory? As for the private preschools, I would like to understand whether parents send their children to private preschools and pay tuition as a matter of choice, or they go to private preschools because there are not enough public preschools that are free of tuition. And I encourage, of course, the new program of doubling or making even more preschools that will be free of tuition. But I would like to understand why parents send their children to private preschools. Is it because of the standard of education, or because they just don't find the public preschool? As for private and public schools, I understand that there are still children who have to work to pay for the tuition, or they receive loans and which they have to pay back. Is there a system helping them to pay back the loans, or I misunderstood the situation? Thank you.
Your Excellency. You have a question? Okay. Yes, I'm going to beg your indulgence, members of the representatives of the government. I realized that there is one question that intrigued us that wasn't actually asked, and I think it's necessary, well, if you're able to respond, it would be very useful to us. On a general level, it seems that school attendance rates are 98% and that literacy rates are similar, over 98%, which suggests that there is a totally equal access to schools among boys and girls. What intrigued us was were the figures in relation to children with disability attending regular schools and special education schools, where the figures for male and female were very, very different. There were at least twice as many boys as girls attending regular schools, children with disabilities, and there were almost twice as many boys than girls attending special education schools. Now, there are various possible explanations for that, of course, but it would be extremely useful for us to understand why there is such an enormous difference. Are there far more boys who are living with disabilities than girls? Are there access problems, etc.? Thank you.
Sure, as concisely as you can. Okay, in response to the questions, the CRC teaching, whether it should be obligatory to teach CRC in the curriculum, there are several reasons why. First of all, our national report has just been released. So for schools, this is indeed something very new. Teachers are not so familiar with CRC. Or in the training of teachers, they have not been taught about CRC. So for continuous training of existing teachers or for pre-job training for new teachers, we have to include the elements relating to CRC to make sure they are adequately equipped with the knowledge to incorporate CRC into their teaching. I think it takes time. Therefore, we will take this matter seriously in the future when we train existing teachers or potential teachers, prospective teachers. We will make sure they are well equipped with the ability to teach CRC. Moreover, in terms of the curriculum in Taiwan, what exactly should be covered in the curriculum? There's a huge debate because there's just so much time students spend at school. What content should be made an obligatory part of the curriculum is the subject of much debate. And in our official curriculum, there's one subject that is quite similar to or quite related to CRC, that is the civics class or civic and social studies. Or CRC can be treated as one standalone social issue and the teacher can teach this social issue in class. But again, the teacher has to be prepared and competent before they can actually do that. So we will make sure that training of teachers will include the CRC component so that the students can learn from their teachers the CRC. The next question about the choice of preschools, public or private. Yes, we don't yet have enough public preschools because our compulsory education starts from grade 1 until grade 9. So the government has not invested enough in preschool education. The private sector, therefore, has been playing the major role in providing preschool education. So before 2013, only 20% of preschools were public preschools. But after the hard work during the past 4 or 5 years, now we have 30% of preschools that are public. We hope by 2020, this figure will rise to 40%. This is a goal we are striving towards. As for the parents' choice, preschool, as I said, preschool education is not part of compulsory education. Therefore, we do respect parents' choices. And parents play a more dominant role in deciding which preschool to go to. Public preschools are more affordable, especially for nonprofit preschools, which may be a bit more expensive than public preschools. They are still more affordable than private preschools. Therefore, most of the time, parents prefer to send their children to public and nonprofit preschools because of their price competitiveness. That's why very often the public preschools will have to draw lots to decide which new students can come into their preschool. Or sometimes parents may choose to homeschool their children.
Some families have more financial resources, so they are willing to pay more to send their children to private preschools as there are more activities over there. About the question on student loan. Well, in compulsory education, the miscellaneous fees are not that much. But if students require loans, they can apply for such student loans, of course. Students who come from economically disadvantaged families can submit a request for loans to support dormitory fees and living expenses or expenses that are associated to internship. If students are still in school, then government help pay for the interest of this loan. Students only need to pay back the loan after they graduate. So there are guidelines to allow for such student loans taken by students if they need it. As for, well, education ratio is very high in Taiwan because 1 to 9 grade is compulsory education, and if students want to go to high school or colleges, usually they are able to do so because of the low birth rate in Taiwan. As for students with disabilities, we have a special education acts that protect the right of children with disabilities. There are 12 different disabilities under this act. And local government has an evaluation committee for students with disabilities. This committee will evaluate the students and assign students to appropriate schools. Such students, well, in fact, 100% of these students who are under this evaluation are able to go to schools to study. But we have to be honest here. We need to respect the rights of the parents. Some parents think that despite the disabilities, they don't want their children to go over or to go through the evaluation. They want to attend regular schools and be a part of the schools, and that is a choice as well. As for the ratio of female and male students with disabilities, why is it at a 2-to-1 ratio between male and female students with disabilities? In Taiwan, all students of disabilities have to be admitted to schools, be it male or female. As for the reason why the ratio of male students with disabilities is higher, is because of genetics. Because ADHD, autism, usually happen more to male students, genetically speaking. And this ratio is, in fact, quite similar to international numbers, and that's why male students with disabilities shows a higher number than female students with disabilities. Are there any other questions from the committee?
No.
No，是不是跟委员建议，如果要进入到下一个主题，是不是先休息一下 ，time break？OK？
Well, I think that is an excellent suggestion. We take a break. Be back 11:15.
各位贵宾，我们审查会议到此告一个段落。接下来为茶叙时间，在会场外备有咖啡与热茶，欢迎各位贵宾享用。我们将在11点15分继续后续的审查会议。